The moment Isaac Ashford saw the cards fall against him, he knew his life was about to change in ways he never could have imagined. And not because of the poker game he had just lost spectacularly to Dutch Morgan, the most ruthless card player and flesh trader in all of Carson City, Nevada, but because of the woman standing in the corner of the saloon, whose eyes met his with a desperation that reached straight into his chest and grabbed hold of his heart. It was June of 1878, and the evening sun cast long shadows through the dusty windows of the Silver Spur Saloon. Isaac had ridden into town 3 days prior with nothing but his horse, his prize saddle that had taken him 2 years of saved wages to afford, and a reputation as one of the finest horse breakers in the territory. The saddle was a work of art, hand-tooled leather with silver conchos that caught the light, made by a master craftsman in San Francisco. Men had offered him twice what he paid for it, but Isaac had always refused. That saddle represented everything he had worked for, every bone he had broken taming wild mustangs, every night he had gone to bed hungry to save the money. The woman in the corner was called Catherine Morgan, and she was Dutch's niece, though the word felt like a lie the moment anyone said it. She had arrived in Carson City 6 months ago from Philadelphia, brought west under the promise that her uncle would help her start a new life after her parents had died in a factory fire. What she found instead was a different kind of prison. Dutch had put her to work in the saloon, serving drinks and enduring the wandering hands of drunk miners and cowboys, and whispers around town suggested he was planning something far worse, selling her contract to a brothel owner in Virginia City. Isaac had noticed Catherine the first night he walked into the Silver Spur. She moved through the crowd like a ghost, her dark blonde hair pinned up in a simple style, her green eyes downcast but alert. There was something about the set of her jaw, the way she held her shoulders back despite everything, that told him she had not given up. She was 20 years old, he would later learn, just 2 years younger than himself, and she carried herself with a dignity that seemed impossible given her circumstances. The poker game had started innocently enough. Isaac had won a few hands, lost a few, keeping roughly even. Dutch had been watching him all evening with those cold gray eyes, shuffling and reshuffling a worn deck of cards. Then Dutch had leaned back in his chair and said something that changed everything. "I hear you got yourself quite the saddle, Ashford. The one with the silver conchos." "Been hearing about it all over town. Man who saw it in the stable said it is probably worth $200, maybe more." Isaac had felt a warning prickle at the back of his neck, but he nodded. "It is a good saddle. Took me a long time to get it. How about we make this game more interesting?" Dutch said, his thin lips curling into something that was not quite a smile. "I got something worth about that much. You win, it is yours. You lose, I get the saddle." "What are you offering?" Isaac had asked, though part of him already knew he should walk away. Dutch had gestured toward Catherine. "Her contract. She owes me for passage west, room and board for 6 months. I figure that is worth about $200. You win, you get the contract. She can work off what she owes to you instead of me. You lose, I get that fancy saddle of yours." Isaac had looked at Catherine then, really looked at her, and saw the naked hope flash across her face before she quickly looked down at the floor. His gut told him this was a setup, that Dutch was playing a deeper game, but he also knew he might be looking at her only chance. "She agrees to this?" Isaac asked. "What she agrees to does not much matter," Dutch said coldly. "She owes me money, and the law says I can transfer that debt however I see fit." Isaac felt anger flare hot in his chest, but he kept his voice level. "I would like to hear her say it." Dutch shrugged and gestured to Catherine. "Get over here, girl." Catherine approached the table slowly, her hands clasped in front of her. Up close, Isaac could see the exhaustion in her face, the small bruise on her wrist where someone had grabbed her too roughly. She looked at Isaac with those green eyes, and he saw intelligence there and fear and something else. Calculation, maybe. Hope, definitely. "This cowboy wants to know if you agree to have your contract wagered in a card game," Dutch said, his voice mocking. "Tell him what you think." Catherine's voice was soft but steady when she spoke. "I think any chance to get away from you is a chance worth taking." She looked directly at Isaac. "Even if it means belonging to someone else." "You would not belong to me," Isaac heard himself say. "If I win, I would tear up the contract. You would be free." The words were out before he fully thought them through, but as soon as he said them, he knew they were true. He could not abide the idea of owning another person's labor, another person's life. It went against everything he believed. Dutch laughed, a harsh sound like rocks grinding together. "Well, is not that noble? You hear that, boys? This cowboy is going to be her knight in shining armor." The other men at the nearby tables chuckled, but there was an edge to it. Everyone knew Dutch did not lose at cards. Catherine's eyes widened slightly, and Isaac saw her lips part as if she wanted to say something, but she stayed silent. "So we have a deal?" Dutch asked, already shuffling the cards. Isaac knew he was probably being played for a fool. He knew that saddle represented years of work. But when he looked at Catherine's face and saw the desperate hope there, he found himself nodding. 5-card draw. Best hand wins. They played with the whole saloon watching. Isaac could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on him, could hear the whispers circulating. He picked up his cards and felt his stomach drop. A pair of 3s. Nothing else worth mentioning. He discarded 3 cards and drew 3 new ones. A third 3 appeared, giving him 3 of a kind. Not a bad hand, but not great either. Dutch laid down his cards with deliberate slowness. A full house, kings over jacks. The saloon erupted in laughter and shouts. Isaac stared at the cards, feeling the loss settle over him like a heavy blanket. His saddle. 2 years of work. Gone in a single hand of cards, but worse than the loss was the look on Catherine's face. The hope had drained away, replaced by blank despair. She turned away from the table, and Isaac saw her shoulders shake once before she steadied herself. "Pleasure doing business with you, Ashford," Dutch said, reaching across the table. "I will have someone fetch that saddle from the stable." Isaac stood up slowly. His mind was racing, trying to find some other option, some other way. He looked at Catherine's back, at the way she held herself so carefully upright, and made a decision that would have seemed insane to him just an hour before. "Wait," he said. "Double or nothing." Dutch paused, his hand still extended. "What? One more hand, I win, I get her contract and my saddle back. You win, you keep the saddle, and I will work for you for 3 months. Free labor. I am a good horsebreaker, that is worth something." The saloon went quiet. Dutch leaned back in his chair, studying Isaac with those cold eyes. "Why would you do that? You already lost. Walk away." "Because it is not right," Isaac said, and his voice carried across the silent room. "What you are doing to her, it is not right. So I am giving myself one more chance to make it right." Dutch smiled then, and it was not a pleasant expression. "You are either the noblest fool I have ever met or the dumbest, but I will take that bet. Sit down." They played again, and this time Isaac's hands were steady even though his heart was pounding. He picked up his cards, a pair of 10s and 3 low cards of different suits. He watched Dutch's face, looking for any tell, any sign. The older man's expression gave nothing away. Isaac discarded the 3 low cards and drew 3 more. His breath caught. Another 10, giving him 3 of a kind plus a jack and a queen. 3 10s. Better than his last hand, but was it enough? Dutch drew 2 cards, his face impassive. They laid down their hands simultaneously. Isaac's 3 10s. Dutch's two pair, aces and eights. For a moment, Isaac could not believe it. He had won. The saloon erupted, but this time the shouts were different, excited, astonished. Dutch stared at the cards on the table, his jaw working. "I will be damned," someone shouted. "He beat Dutch Morgan." Dutch looked up at Isaac, and there was real anger in his eyes now. "Looks like luck is with you tonight, Cowboy. Catherine, get your things. You are going with him." He stood abruptly and walked to the bar, pulling out a piece of paper from his vest pocket. He scrawled something on it and shoved it at Isaac. "Her contract. Signed over to you. Now get out of my saloon." Isaac took the paper, his hands shaking slightly now that the adrenaline was catching up with him. He looked over at Catherine, who was staring at him with an expression he could not quite read. Disbelief, maybe, gratitude, something else underneath. "Get your things," he said gently. "Whatever you want to take with you." Catherine nodded and disappeared up the stairs at the back of the saloon. The other patrons were slapping Isaac on the back, laughing and shouting, but he barely heard them. His mind was already racing ahead, trying to figure out what came next. He had just won a woman's freedom in a card game, but he still had no saddle. And he had just made an enemy of Dutch Morgan, which was never a wise thing to do. Catherine came back down 5 minutes later with a small cloth bag. That was it. Everything she owned in the world fit in one small bag. Isaac felt another wave of anger at Dutch, at the circumstances that had brought her to this point. "I am ready," she said quietly. They walked out of the Silver Spur together into the cooling evening air. Carson City was settling in for the night, lights beginning to appear in windows, the sound of a piano drifting from another saloon down the street. Isaac led her toward the stable where he had been boarding his horse. "I should explain," he started, but Catherine interrupted him. "You do not have your saddle," she said. "It was not a question. No, but that is all right. I can get another one eventually." Catherine stopped walking and turned to face him. In the fading light, her face looked younger, more vulnerable. "Why did you do that? You do not even know me." Isaac thought about how to answer that. "I could not stand by and watch," he finally said. "Dutch was going to sell you to a brothel. Everyone knew it. And I have never been good at watching bad things happen when I might be able to stop them. You gambled away 2 years of your life for a saddle you lost on purpose, did not you?" Catherine said, and there was something sharp in her voice, something that cut through the gratitude. "That first hand, you threw it." Isaac met her eyes and saw that she was not just intelligent but quick, reading situations with the kind of clarity that came from having to survive by your wits. "I did not throw it. I just did not try very hard to win. But the second hand, that was real. I got lucky." "Why?" Catherine asked, and her voice broke slightly on the word. "Why would you do that for me? You do not know me. You do not owe me anything." "Because you deserved a chance," Isaac said simply. "And because that saddle was just a thing. You are a person. The choice seemed pretty clear." Catherine stared at him for a long moment, and then, to his surprise, she started to cry. Not loud, dramatic sobs, but quiet tears that slid down her cheeks as her shoulders shook. Isaac stood there awkwardly, not sure what to do, and then Catherine stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him in a fierce hug. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Isaac carefully put his arms around her, feeling the fragile bones of her back, the way she trembled. "You are welcome," he said. "And I meant what I said. I am going to tear up that contract. You are free." Catherine pulled back, wiping at her eyes. "Where will I go? I have no money, no family." "Dutch was the last of my relatives." "We will figure something out," Isaac said, though he had no idea what that might be. "First, let us get my horse and find somewhere safe for you to stay tonight. There is a boarding house near the edge of town run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson. She is a good woman. We can get you a room there for a few days while we work out the details." They walked to the stable together, and Isaac saddled his horse, a sturdy bay mare named Rosie. Without his prize saddle, he had to use the old worn one he kept as a spare, cracked leather and no silver conchos, but it would do. Catherine watched him work, and he was conscious of her gaze, the way she studied his movements. "You are good with horses," she said. "I should be. It is how I make my living, breaking and training them mostly. Sometimes I buy wild mustangs and gentle them for sale." He finished tightening the cinch and turned to face her. "Can you ride?" "Not really. We did not have horses in Philadelphia." "You can ride with me then. It is not far." He mounted Rosie and then reached down to pull Catherine up behind him. She settled awkwardly at first, unsure where to put her hands, and then she wrapped her arms around his waist as Rosie started walking. Isaac tried not to think about how it felt to have her pressed against his back, her arms around him. This was about helping someone in need, nothing more. They rode through the darkening streets of Carson City, past the other saloons and shops, past the assayer's office and the general store. Mrs. Patterson's boarding house was a 2-story frame building painted white, with a neat garden in front. Isaac helped Catherine down from the horse and then tied Rosie to the hitching post. Mrs. Patterson answered the door herself, a plump woman in her 50s with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a bun. "Isaac Ashford, what brings you by at this hour?" "Evening, Mrs. Patterson. This is Catherine Morgan. She needs a room, and I was hoping you might have one available. I will pay for a week up front." Mrs. Patterson's eyes moved from Isaac to Catherine, taking in the girl's worn dress, her tear-stained face, the small bag clutched in her hands. Something in the older woman's expression softened. "I have a room. Come in, both of you." Inside, the boarding house was warm and welcoming, with lace curtains on the windows and the smell of bread baking. Mrs. Patterson led them to a small room on the second floor, simply furnished but clean, with a bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the street. "This will do nicely," Isaac said. He pulled out the money from his pocket, counting out what he owed for a week's rent. His savings were getting thin, but that was a problem for tomorrow. "The room includes breakfast and supper," Mrs. Patterson said to Catherine. "There is fresh water in the pitcher and extra blankets in the trunk if you need them." "Do you need anything else, dear?" Catherine shook her head, still looking a bit dazed by the sudden change in her circumstances. "No, madam. This is perfect, thank you." After Mrs. Patterson left, Isaac pulled out the contract from his pocket. Catherine watched as he unfolded the paper and read it over. It was a standard indenture contract, stating that Catherine Morgan owed Dutch Morgan $200 for passage and expenses, to be paid through labor over the course of 2 years, unless the debt was discharged by other means. Isaac had a thought. "Can you read and write?" "Yes. My mother made sure I had a good education before she died. Then I want you to watch this." Isaac took the contract to the lamp and held it to the flame. The paper caught quickly, burning bright, and he held it until the fire got close to his fingers before dropping it into the wash basin where it curled into ash. Catherine gasped. "You really did it. You really freed me. I told you I would." Isaac brushed the ash from his hands. "You do not owe me anything, Catherine. Not money, not work, nothing. You are your own person now." "But what about your saddle?" 2 years of savings, you said. How will you get another one?" Isaac shrugged, trying to seem casual even though the loss of his saddle still hurt. "I will save up again. It will not take as long this time, now that I know what I am doing. Besides, it was worth it. Some things matter more than leather and silver." Catherine sat down on the edge of the bed, looking up at him. In the lamplight, he could see how beautiful she was, not in a flashy way, but in something quieter and deeper. Her face had good bones, strong and fine, and her eyes held a depth that spoke of intelligence and resilience. "I do not know how to thank you," she said. "You gave up so much for someone you do not even know." "Maybe I would like to know you," Isaac said, and then felt his face heat. That had come out more forward than he intended. "I mean, you seem like a good person, and you have had a rough time of it. I am glad I could help." Catherine smiled, the first real smile he had seen from her, and it transformed her face. "I would like to know you too, Isaac Ashford. I think you might be the kindest man I have ever met." They talked for a while longer, carefully feeling their way through the strange new dynamic between them. Catherine told him about her life in Philadelphia, about her parents who had worked in the textile mill, about the fire that had killed them and left her with nothing. She talked about the letters from her uncle promising her a fresh start, and the crushing disappointment when she arrived to find he wanted to use her, not help her. Isaac told her about growing up on a ranch in California, about learning to ride before he could walk, about deciding to strike out on his own to make his fortune breaking horses. He had been traveling through Nevada for the past year, working odd jobs and building his reputation. Finally, when the night had grown late, Isaac stood to leave. "You should get some rest. Tomorrow we can figure out what comes next. Maybe there are jobs in town, or we could see about getting you passage somewhere else if you want to leave Nevada." "I do not know where I would go," Catherine admitted, "but I am not worried about that right now. Tonight, for the first time in 6 months, I feel safe. That is enough." Isaac nodded and moved toward the door. Catherine stood and caught his hand, stopping him. "Isaac, I meant what I said. I do not know how to thank you properly, but I promise you this. Somehow I am going to make sure you never regret what you did tonight. I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure this was worth it." "You do not have to do that," Isaac said gently. "Just be happy. That will be enough." But Catherine shook her head, her grip on his hand tightening. "I do have to. You do not understand yet, but you will. You saved my life tonight, Isaac, not just from Dutch, but from giving up. I had almost stopped believing that there were good people in the world. You proved me wrong. That is worth everything." Isaac did not know what to say to that, so he just squeezed her hand and then left, closing the door softly behind him. As he rode Rosie back to the small room he was renting above the saddlery, he found his mind full of Catherine's face, her voice, the way she had looked at him like he was something more than he knew himself to be. He had given up his prized saddle, the thing he valued most in the world besides Rosie, for a woman he barely knew. It should have felt like a mistake, like a moment of foolishness he would regret in the morning. But as he lay down on his narrow bed that night, staring at the ceiling, all Isaac could think was that somehow, impossibly, it felt like the most right thing he had ever done. The next morning, Isaac woke early and went to check on the horses he was currently training for a local rancher. The work was steady and paid decently, but he would need to take on more jobs if he was going to rebuild his savings. Without his prized saddle, he felt oddly light, as if he had been carrying a weight he had not fully realized was there. After finishing the morning's work, he made his way to Mrs. Patterson's boarding house. Catherine was sitting on the front porch, wearing the same dress as the night before but looking more rested. Her hair was down around her shoulders, catching the morning light, and she smiled when she saw him approaching. "Good morning," she said. "I was hoping you would come by. Morning, how did you sleep?" "Better than I have in months. A real bed, a locked door, no drunk minors trying to grab me. It felt like heaven." She stood up, brushing down her skirt. "I have been thinking about what I should do next. Mrs. Patterson mentioned that the general store is looking for help. The owner's wife just had a baby and needs someone to mind the counter a few days a week." "That sounds like a good start," Isaac said, pleased that she was already looking ahead, making plans. I went over there this morning and talked to Mr. Henderson. He said he would give me a try starting tomorrow. It does not pay much, but it is something. Combined with what little sewing work I can pick up, I should be able to support myself. Isaac felt a swell of admiration for her determination. That is great, Catherine. Really great. They walked together through town, and Isaac found himself pointing out various landmarks, introducing her to people he knew. Carson City was not huge, maybe 1,500 people, but it was a bustling place, full of miners and ranchers and traders passing through. Catherine listened to everything, asked smart questions, and Isaac could see her confidence growing with each passing hour. Over the next several weeks, they fell into a routine. Isaac would work with his horses during the day, and in the evenings he would meet Catherine and they would walk together, talking about everything and nothing. She proved to be quick-witted and funny, with a sharp tongue when she wanted and a gentleness that surprised him given what she had been through. Catherine started working at Henderson's general store and quickly became invaluable. She was good with numbers, organized, and had a way with customers that made people want to come back. Mr. Henderson raised her pay after just 2 weeks, and Catherine carefully saved every penny. But what surprised Isaac most was how Catherine kept finding small ways to thank him. She would appear with a carefully packed lunch on days when she knew he would be working through the noon hour. She mended a tear in his shirt that he had been meaning to fix for weeks. When she learned that his birthday was coming up in August, she saved up and bought him a new pair of leather work gloves, the good kind that would last. "You should not have spent your money on me," Isaac protested when she gave him the gloves. "You spent 2 years of savings on me," Catherine replied. "I think I can spare a few dollars for gloves." But it was more than just the gifts. Catherine had a way of listening to him that made Isaac feel truly heard. She asked about his dreams for the future, about the ranch he hoped to own someday, and she remembered every detail. When he had a bad day, when a horse proved particularly difficult or a client was unreasonable, Catherine would sit with him on Mrs. Patterson's porch and just let him talk until he felt better. And slowly, so gradually that Isaac barely noticed it happening, he fell in love with her. It was not a sudden thing, not a lightning bolt. It was in the way his heart lifted when he saw her walking toward him down the street. It was in how her laugh made him want to do anything to hear it again. It was in the comfortable silence they could share, sitting on the porch watching the sunset, not needing to fill every moment with words. By late August, Isaac knew he was in trouble. He was in love with Catherine Morgan, deeply and completely, but he had no idea if she felt the same way. She was affectionate with him, always ready with a smile or a kind word, but she had been through so much. He worried that she saw him as her rescuer, not as a man she could love. He worried that pushing for something more would ruin the friendship they had built. One evening in early September, they were walking along the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open land and the mountains rose in the distance. The air was cooling as autumn approached, carrying the smell of sage and dust. Catherine was telling him about a difficult customer at the store when she suddenly stopped mid-sentence. "Isaac, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Anything." Catherine turned to face him, her expression serious. "Why have you not asked to court me?" Isaac felt his heart stutter. What? You heard me. We have been spending nearly every evening together for 2 months. You clearly enjoy my company, and I certainly enjoy yours. Mrs. Patterson keeps hinting that you should make your intentions known. So why have you not?" Isaac ran a hand through his hair, feeling flustered. "I did not want to presume anything. You have been through so much, Catherine. The last thing I wanted was to make you feel obligated to me because of what happened that night at the saloon." Catherine stepped closer to him, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her green eyes. Isaac Ashford, I am not in the habit of spending my free time with men I feel obligated to. If I did not want to see you, I would not. I am not that girl anymore, the one who had to do what she was told. You made sure of that. I know, but do you have feelings for me? Catherine interrupted, her voice direct. Real feelings beyond friendship. Isaac took a breath and decided that honesty was the only path forward. Yes. I have feelings for you. I think I started falling for you that first night, if I am being honest. But I did not know if you felt the same, and I did not want to risk our friendship by— Catherine kissed him. She simply stepped forward, rose up on her toes, and pressed her lips to his. It was quick and chaste, but it sent electricity racing through Isaac's entire body. When she pulled back, she was smiling. I have been waiting for you to do that for weeks, she said, but I got tired of waiting, so I decided to take matters into my own hands. Isaac laughed, feeling lighter than he had in months. So, just to be clear, does this mean you have feelings for me too? I love you, you wonderful idiot, Catherine said, and there were tears in her eyes, but she was smiling. I have loved you since you set that contract on fire. Maybe even before that, when you told Dutch I would not belong to you. I have never had anyone stand up for me like that. I have never had anyone treat me like I mattered. And then you did, and you kept doing it, every single day. How could I not fall in love with you? Isaac pulled her into his arms, holding her close, feeling her heart beat against his chest. I love you too. I love you so much it scares me sometimes. I keep thinking I am going to wake up and this will all have been a dream. It is not a dream, Catherine murmured against his shoulder. It is real. We are real. And I meant what I told you that first night. I am going to spend my life making sure you never regret trading that saddle for me. I already do not regret it, Isaac said, not for a single second. They stood there in the fading light, holding each other, and Isaac felt a sense of completeness that he had never experienced before. This was what he had been looking for without knowing it, this connection, this love. Everything he had worked for, everything he had saved, seemed insignificant compared to this moment. Over the next several months, Isaac and Catherine's relationship deepened. They courted properly, with Isaac calling on her at the boarding house, taking her to church socials and town gatherings. Mrs. Patterson was delighted and took every opportunity to tell anyone who would listen about how romantic their story was. The town of Carson City embraced them as a couple. People loved the story of the cowboy who had gambled away his prize saddle to save a woman from a terrible fate. It became the kind of tale that got told and retold, growing slightly more dramatic with each telling. Dutch Morgan left town in October, owing debts to several people and facing questions about some missing money from a local rancher. Isaac was not sorry to see him go, though he knew Catherine still sometimes woke from nightmares about her time working for her uncle. By December, Isaac had saved enough money to make a down payment on a small piece of land outside of town. It was not much, just 20 acres with a creek running through it and a small cabin that needed work, but it had good grazing and was perfect for his plans to expand his horse training business. On Christmas Eve, Isaac took Catherine out to see the property. Snow had fallen the night before, covering everything in white, and the mountains in the distance looked like something from a painting. They stood in front of the cabin, their breath fogging in the cold air, and Isaac felt his hands shaking as he reached into his pocket. I know it is not much, he said. The cabin needs a lot of work and it will take years to build this place into a real ranch, but I look at it and I see a future, our future if you want it. Catherine turned to look at him, her cheeks pink from the cold, her eyes bright. What are you saying? Isaac pulled out the ring he had bought with the last of his savings. It was simple, just a thin gold band with a small diamond, but it was the best he could afford. "I am saying I love you, Catherine Morgan. I am saying I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I am saying I want to build this ranch with you, raise a family with you, grow old with you. Will you marry me?" Catherine stared at the ring, and for a terrifying moment Isaac thought she might say no. Then she looked up at him with tears streaming down her face and nodded. "Yes. Yes. 1,000 times yes. There is nothing I want more than to be your wife." Isaac slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, and then he was kissing her, tasting the salt of her tears and the sweetness of her mouth, feeling like his heart might burst from sheer joy. They were married in February of 1879, in the small church in Carson City. Mrs. Patterson helped Catherine make her wedding dress, a simple but elegant gown of white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. Isaac wore his best suit, the one he had bought for funerals and weddings, and when Catherine walked down the aisle toward him, he felt his throat tighten with emotion. She was beautiful, radiant with happiness, and as the Reverend led them through the vows, Isaac could barely believe this was his life. Catherine repeated her promises in a strong, clear voice, and when she said, "I do," Isaac felt like everything in his life had led to this moment. The reception was held at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house, with half the town attending. People brought food and gifts, and there was music and dancing. Isaac danced with his new wife, holding her close, feeling her laugh against his chest, and knew with absolute certainty that he was the luckiest man alive. That night, they stayed in the cabin on their new property. Isaac had spent the past weeks fixing it up, patching the roof, repairing the floors, installing a new wood stove. It was still rough, but it was theirs. Catherine walked through the small space, running her hands over the furniture Isaac had built, the curtains Mrs. Patterson had helped her sew, and then she turned to him with a smile that made his breath catch. "Take me to bed, husband," she said softly. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, full of whispered words and gentle touches. Catherine had been nervous, admitting she did not know much about what happened between a husband and wife, and Isaac had been patient, careful, making sure she felt safe and loved. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, and Catherine traced patterns on his chest with her fingertip. "I was so afraid I would never have this," she said quietly. "When I was working at the saloon, watching those women who had given up hope, I was terrified that would be me someday, that I would forget what it felt like to be treated with respect, to be loved. And then you walked into my life and changed everything." Isaac kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair. "You changed my life too. Before you, I was just drifting, chasing the next job, the next horse. I had no real purpose beyond surviving and maybe getting ahead a little. But now I have something to build for, someone to build it with. You gave me that." "We gave each other that," Catherine corrected. "That is what love is not it? Two people making each other better, stronger, making a life together that is more than either could have alone." They talked late into the night, making plans for the ranch, for the future. Catherine wanted to start a vegetable garden in the spring and maybe get some chickens. Isaac talked about the horses he hoped to buy and train, about building a proper barn and corrals. They dreamed together, and it felt like anything was possible. Life on the ranch was hard work, but they threw themselves into it with determination. Isaac took on every horse training job he could find, often working from dawn until long after dark. Catherine managed the household, kept the books for the business, and started her garden as soon as the ground thawed in the spring. She also began making plans to ensure Isaac could replace his prize saddle. Without telling him, she started taking in sewing work from women in town, mending and altering clothes in the evenings after all the other work was done. She saved every penny she made in a jar hidden in the back of the cupboard. By summer, the ranch was starting to take shape. Isaac had built a small barn and 2 corrals, and he had 3 horses in various stages of training. Word of his skill had spread, and ranchers were coming from as far as 50 miles away to have him gentle their horses. In August, Catherine discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but when the doctor confirmed it, she felt a mixture of joy and terror. She had seen so many women in Philadelphia die in childbirth, and the memory haunted her. But when she told Isaac and saw the sheer delight on his face, her fear eased a little. "We are going to have a baby," Isaac said wonderingly, putting his hand on her still flat belly. "A little person who is part you and part me. I cannot quite believe it." "I am scared," Catherine admitted. "What if something goes wrong? What if I am not a good mother?" "You are going to be an amazing mother," Isaac said firmly. "And nothing is going to go wrong. I will make sure of it. I will take care of you every single day until this baby comes safely into the world." And he did. Isaac became almost comically protective, insisting Catherine rest more, not lift anything heavy. He took over more of the household chores, cooking meals and doing laundry on top of his ranch work. Catherine protested that she was pregnant, not sick, but she was secretly touched by his devotion. As her belly grew, Catherine continued her secret sewing work, though she had to get creative about hiding it from Isaac. By October, she had saved nearly $100, hidden in the jar in the cupboard. It was not enough yet for a saddle like the one Isaac had lost, but she was determined to get there. In December, Catherine sat Isaac down one evening after dinner. She had been thinking about this for weeks, trying to figure out the right way to tell him. "I need to show you something," she said, and went to retrieve the jar from the cupboard. She set it on the table in front of him, and his eyes widened at the sight of all the money. "Where did this come from?" he asked. "I have been taking in sewing work. Mending, alterations, sometimes making new dresses. I have been saving every penny." Catherine put her hand over his. "It is for your saddle, a new one like the one you lost. It is not enough yet, but in another year or 2 I should have enough saved." Isaac stared at the money and then at his wife, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Catherine, you do not need to do this. I told you I do not regret what I did, not for a second. I know you do not, but I do. I regret that you lost something so valuable, something you worked so hard for because of me. So I am going to replace it. You are going to have the finest saddle in the territory, Isaac Ashford, and every time you use it, you will remember that I love you, that I appreciate what you did for me, that you never have to regret choosing me." Isaac pulled her into his arms, careful of her rounded belly. "I could never regret choosing you. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. But thank you. Thank you for caring, for working so hard. I love you so much." Their first child, a son they named James, was born in March of 1880. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Isaac feared he would lose Catherine. But she fought through it with the same determination she brought to everything, and when the baby finally came, wailing and red-faced, Isaac wept with relief. Catherine was exhausted but glowing as she held their son. "He is perfect," she whispered. "Look at him, Isaac. We made him." Isaac looked at his wife and newborn son and felt his heart expand in his chest. This was his family. These were the people he would work for, fight for, build a life for. Everything made sense in that moment. Catherine recovered slowly from the birth, but she was determined to get back to her sewing work as soon as possible. Isaac protested, saying she should focus on caring for James and herself, but Catherine was stubborn. "I am close," she told him. "Another $100 and I can commission the saddle. I am not giving up now." By the time James was 6 months old, Catherine had saved enough money. She went to the best saddle maker in Carson City, a man named Thomas Wright, who was known throughout Nevada for his craftsmanship. She described in detail what she wanted: hand-tooled leather with a design of wild horses running across the horizon, silver conchos even finer than the ones on Isaac's original saddle, stirrups that were perfectly balanced, the finest quality leather throughout. "It will take me 6 months to make something like that," Mr. Wright said. "Maybe longer. This is masterwork you are describing." "Take as long as you need," Catherine said, "but it has to be perfect. It is for my husband. He gave up a saddle like this to free me from a bad situation. Now I am going to make sure he has something even better." Mr. Wright smiled. "I heard about that. Quite the story. I will make you the finest saddle I have ever crafted, Mrs. Ashford. Your husband is a lucky man." "I am the lucky one," Catherine said quietly. "But I want to make sure he knows how much what he did meant to me." The saddle took 8 months to complete. During that time, life on the ranch continued. Isaac expanded his horse training business, taking on more clients and hiring a young man named Timothy to help with the basic care of the horses. The ranch was starting to turn a real profit, and Isaac was able to buy an additional 20 acres of land adjoining their property. Catherine managed the household and cared for James, who was growing into a happy, healthy baby with Isaac's dark hair and her green eyes. She also continued taking on sewing work when she could, both because she enjoyed it and because she wanted to make sure they had savings put away. She never forgot what it was like to have nothing, and she was determined that her family would never face that kind of desperation. In December of 1880, Mr. Wright sent word that the saddle was complete. Catherine arranged for Isaac to be occupied with work on the far side of the property and then drove the wagon into town to see it. The saddle was breathtaking. The leather was a rich, deep brown, so perfectly worked that it felt like silk under her fingers. The design of wild horses running across the horizon was incredibly detailed, each animal captured in mid-stride, manes flying. The silver conchos caught the light and gleamed. The stirrups were perfectly balanced, the stitching immaculate. "Mr. Wright, this is incredible," Catherine breathed. "It is even more beautiful than I imagined." "I may have outdone myself," the saddle maker admitted proudly. "This is the best work I have ever done. Your husband is going to love it." Catherine paid the final installment and carefully loaded the saddle into the back of the wagon, covering it with a blanket. Her heart was racing with excitement as she drove back to the ranch. This was it. Nearly 3 years after Isaac had given up his prized saddle for her freedom, she was finally going to be able to replace it with something even better. She arranged to give Isaac the saddle on Christmas morning. It was harder than she expected to keep it hidden for the few weeks until then, but she managed, stashing it in the barn under a pile of hay where Isaac would not think to look. Christmas morning dawned clear and cold. Catherine woke early and nursed James, who was now 9 months old and babbling happily. Isaac made coffee and breakfast, and they exchanged small gifts. Catherine had knitted Isaac a new scarf. He had carved her a beautiful jewelry box from cherry wood, with their initials and wedding date engraved on the top. "There is one more thing," Catherine said after they had opened everything else. "It is out in the barn. Come with me." Isaac looked puzzled but followed her outside, carrying James bundled against the cold. In the barn, Catherine pulled back the blanket covering the saddle, revealing it in all its glory. Isaac froze, staring at the saddle. His mouth opened but no sound came out. He walked closer slowly, as if in a dream, and ran his hand over the tooled leather. "Catherine, what is this?" "It is your saddle, the one I have been saving for since we got married. I know it cannot replace the original one exactly, but I wanted you to have something just as good. Something that shows you how much what you did for me mattered, how much it still matters." Isaac looked at her with tears streaming down his face. "You have been saving for this all this time. All those late nights sewing, all those extra jobs. This is what it was for. I told you I would spend my life making sure you never regretted trading your saddle for my freedom," Catherine said, her own eyes wet. "I meant it." Isaac set James down carefully in his basket and then pulled Catherine into his arms. "I have never regretted it, not for one single moment. But this, Catherine, this is beyond anything I could have imagined. This saddle is a work of art." "You gave me a new life," Catherine said simply. "You gave me freedom and love and a family. You gave me everything that matters. The least I could do is make sure you have the finest saddle in Nevada." They stood in the barn holding each other, with their baby son making happy noises nearby, and Isaac felt a sense of completeness that went beyond words. This woman, this incredible woman, had taken his impulsive act of kindness and transformed it into something deeper. She had spent years working toward this moment, driven by love and gratitude and determination. "I love you," he said. "I love you more than I can ever express." "I love you too," Catherine replied. "Now go try out your new saddle. I want to see how it fits." Isaac saddled Rosie with the new saddle, and the fit was perfect. Mr. Wright had done an incredible job, balancing the weight and design exactly right. Isaac rode around the property, testing it, and the saddle felt like it was made for him. Which, of course, it had been. Word of the saddle spread through Carson City and the surrounding ranches. People came from miles around to see it, and Isaac's reputation as a horse trainer grew even stronger. But every time someone admired the saddle, Isaac made sure to tell them the whole story. How his wife had saved for years, working late into the night, all to replace what he had given up to free her. The story became legend in Carson City, told and retold. The cowboy who had traded his prize saddle for a woman's freedom, and the woman who had spent years making sure he never regretted it. It became the kind of love story people held up as an example, proof that true love and loyalty still existed in the rough and tumble West. Over the years, Isaac and Catherine's ranch grew. They bought more land, built a larger house, and expanded the horse training business until it was one of the most successful in the region. Isaac became known throughout Nevada and into California as one of the finest horse trainers around, and much of his success was due to Catherine's business sense and careful management of their finances. They had 3 more children over the next decade. Another son named William, born in 1882, a daughter they named Sarah, born in 1885, and a third son named Thomas, born in 1888. Catherine threw herself into motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything, and the children grew up happy and loved on the ranch. But through all of it, Catherine never forgot where they had come from. She never forgot those desperate months working in Dutch Morgan's saloon, never forgot the moment Isaac had burned her contract and set her free. Every decision she made, every late night she spent working on the ranch accounts or mending clothes or caring for the children, was driven by a determination to honor what Isaac had done for her. And Isaac never forgot either. Every time he used the saddle Catherine had bought him, he thought about her years of saving, her determination to repay him for something that had never needed repayment. It reminded him that love was not just a feeling but a choice, made every day in 1,000 small ways. In 1890, Isaac and Catherine celebrated their 11th wedding anniversary. They were sitting on the porch of their house, watching the sun set over the mountains, with their children playing in the yard. James was now 10, William was 8, Sarah was 5, and Thomas was 2. Do you ever think about how different our lives could have been? Catherine asked, leaning against Isaac's shoulder. If you had not come into the saloon that night, if you had not been willing to risk everything for someone you did not even know. Sometimes, Isaac admitted. But only to appreciate what we have now. I cannot imagine my life without you, without our children. This is everything I ever wanted, even when I did not know I wanted it. I think about it often, Catherine said quietly. I think about the woman I would have become if you had not freed me. Dutch was going to sell me to that brothel. I would have ended up like so many of those poor women, broken and hopeless. But you gave me a chance at a real life. You gave me myself back. Isaac turned to look at her, still seeing the beautiful young woman he had fallen in love with, even though both of them were showing the signs of a life of hard work. You gave me just as much. Before you, I was lonely without fully realizing it. I had goals and ambitions, but no one to share them with, no one who really saw me. You changed everything. Catherine smiled and kissed him softly. We changed each other. That is what love does, I think. It transforms us into better versions of ourselves. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play. James was helping William build something out of scraps of wood. Sarah was picking wildflowers. Thomas was toddling around, exploring everything with the fearless curiosity of a 2-year-old. What are you thinking about? Isaac asked. I am thinking about how lucky I am, how blessed. I have a husband who loves me, beautiful children, a home, security. Everything I have is because you were willing to risk so much for a stranger. I will never stop being grateful for that, Isaac. Never. And I will never stop being grateful that you chose to spend your life with me, Isaac replied. That you work so hard every day to make this ranch, our family, our life together a success. You are the strongest person I know, Catherine. You amaze me every single day. The years continued to pass. The children grew and thrived. James showed a natural talent with horses and began working alongside Isaac. William was more interested in books and learning, and they sent him to a school in San Francisco when he was 15. Sarah inherited her mother's business sense and started helping with the ranch accounts when she was just 12. Thomas was still young, but he had his father's gentle way with animals and his mother's determination. The ranch continued to prosper. By 1895, they had over 200 acres, a large, comfortable house, 2 barns, and a reputation that extended throughout the West. Isaac's prize saddle, the one Catherine had commissioned, became famous in its own right. Other ranchers asked Mr. Wright to make them saddles in the same style, but the saddle maker always said that Isaac's was the finest work he had ever done, and he could never quite match it again. Catherine had long since stopped taking in sewing work, but she found other ways to contribute. She started a small school on the ranch for the local children, teaching them reading and arithmetic a few days a week. She organized community events in Carson City, bringing people together. She became known throughout the area as a woman of intelligence, kindness, and formidable determination. But despite their success and the passage of time, Isaac and Catherine never lost sight of what had brought them together. Every year on the anniversary of the night they met, they would go into Carson City and have dinner at the restaurant that had been built where the Silver Spur Saloon once stood. They would talk about that night, about how terrified Catherine had been, about how Isaac had gambled away his most prized possession for her freedom. I still cannot quite believe you did it, Catherine said during one of these anniversary dinners in 1898. They had been married for 19 years now, and time had added gray to both their hair and lines to their faces, but the love between them had only deepened. Which part? Isaac asked with a smile. Gambling for your contract in the first place, or doubling down when I lost, all of it. The whole impossible, wonderful, foolish thing. You had no reason to care about me. I was just another unfortunate woman in a bad situation. But you saw me as a person worth saving. That meant everything. You were worth saving, Isaac said simply. You are worth everything. In 1900, their eldest son James got married to a young woman named Mary, and they built a small house on the edge of the ranch property. Isaac and Catherine became grandparents when James and Mary welcomed a daughter in 1901. Catherine held her granddaughter for the first time and felt tears streaming down her face. "What is wrong?" Isaac asked, concerned. "Nothing is wrong. Everything is perfect. I am just thinking about how close I came to never having any of this. If you had not saved me that night, I would never have known what it was like to be a wife, a mother, a grandmother. I would never have known true happiness. I owe you everything, Isaac. Everything that matters in my life came from that one night when you chose to help me." Isaac pulled her close, careful of the baby in her arms. "And everything that matters in my life came from knowing you, from loving you, from building this life together. We do not owe each other, Catherine. We just love each other. That is all." But Catherine shook her head. "I know you see it that way. But I promised you that first night that I would spend my life making sure you never regretted trading that saddle for my freedom. That is a promise I intend to keep until the day I die." As they grew older, Isaac and Catherine settled into a comfortable rhythm. Isaac gradually turned more of the horse training work over to James, though he still worked with the animals he loved. Catherine reduced her community activities, but continued to manage the ranch finances and help with her growing brood of grandchildren. They celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary in 1904 with a large party attended by friends and family from all over Nevada and California. People stood up to give toasts, and the story of how Isaac and Catherine met was told again, still capturing hearts after all these years. Their son William, now a lawyer in San Francisco, gave a particularly moving speech. "My parents taught me that love is not just about feelings, though feelings matter. It is about action. It is about sacrifice. My father gave up his most precious possession to free a woman he barely knew. My mother spent years working to replace what he had given up, driven by love and gratitude. They showed all of us what it means to truly love another person, to put that person's welfare above your own. That is a lesson I carry with me every day." Catherine wiped tears from her eyes as she listened. Isaac squeezed her hand under the table, and they shared a look that communicated more than words ever could. In 1908, Isaac fell ill with pneumonia. For days, Catherine barely left his side, caring for him with the same fierce determination she had brought to everything else in their life together. The doctor was worried, telling their children that Isaac might not survive, but Catherine refused to accept that. "You are not leaving me," she told Isaac during one particularly bad night, when his fever was high and he was drifting in and out of consciousness. "We have more years ahead of us, more memories to make. You saved my life 30 years ago, and I am going to save yours now. You are going to fight this, Isaac Ashford. Fight for me. Fight for our family. Fight for the life we still have ahead of us." And somehow, Isaac did fight. Whether it was Catherine's determination, the doctor's care, or simply stubborn will, he slowly began to improve. By March, he was well enough to sit up and take short walks. By April, he was back to doing light work around the ranch. "You brought me back," he told Catherine one evening as they sat together on the porch, wrapped in blankets against the cool spring air. "I could hear you when I was sick, telling me to fight, and I could not give up, not when you needed me, not after everything we have built together. I told you I would spend my life making sure you never regretted choosing me," Catherine said. "That includes making sure you stick around to enjoy the life we made." Isaac laughed and pulled her closer. I love you. I love you more now than I did 30 years ago, and I loved you so much then I could barely breathe. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Catherine. The very best thing. They had their 30th wedding anniversary in 1909, a quieter celebration than the 25th, but no less meaningful. By now they had 6 grandchildren, with more on the way. The ranch was thriving under James's management, though Isaac still helped when he felt up to it. William was a successful lawyer. Sarah had married a rancher and lived with her family about 20 miles away. Thomas was courting a young woman from town and would likely be married within the year. We did well, Isaac said to Catherine as they sat together that evening. Look at what we built. This family, this ranch, this life. All of it started from one night in a saloon when I could not stand by and do nothing. All of it started because you were the kind of man who would give up everything he had worked for to help someone in need, Catherine corrected. That is who you are, Isaac. That is who you have always been. I just feel blessed that I was the one you chose to help. And I feel blessed that you chose me right back, Isaac replied. That you saw something in a foolish cowboy that was worth loving. That you worked so hard all these years, not just to replace a saddle, but to build this incredible life with me. Catherine leaned her head on his shoulder. I would do it all again. Every late night sewing, every difficult moment, every challenge. I would do it all again in a heartbeat because it led to this. To you, to us, to this family we made together. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the mountains they had looked at together for 3 decades. The land stretched out before them, their land, worked and improved by years of effort. In the distance, they could hear their grandchildren playing, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. Isaac thought about his life, about the journey that had led him here. He had started as a drifter, a cowboy with no real roots, chasing the next job and saving for a fancy saddle. And then one night in a saloon, he had seen a woman who needed help, and everything had changed. He had given up that saddle, that symbol of his old life and ambitions, and gained something infinitely more valuable in return. Catherine thought about her own journey, from desperate orphan to enslaved servant to free woman to wife and mother and grandmother. Every good thing in her life traced back to that moment when Isaac had stood up to Dutch Morgan and gambled for her freedom. She had meant it when she promised to spend her life making sure he never regretted it. Every day since, she had worked to honor that promise, not out of obligation but out of love. In 1912, Isaac and Catherine celebrated their 33rd wedding anniversary. Isaac was now 54 years old, and Catherine was 52. They were not young anymore, but they were still active and engaged with life. The ranch was a thriving operation now, passed fully to James's management but still their home. That summer, Catherine organized a family reunion. All of their children came home with their families, filling the house and yard with noise and laughter. There were now 10 grandchildren in total, ranging from age 11 down to a baby just 6 months old. On the last evening of the reunion, after the children had been put to bed, and the older grandchildren had wandered off to play in the twilight, Isaac and Catherine's adult children gathered on the porch with their parents. We wanted to tell you something, James said, speaking for all of them. We have been talking, and we all agreed. We want you to know how grateful we are for everything you have given us. Not just the ranch and the security and the opportunities, but the example. You showed us what real love looks like, what commitment and sacrifice and partnership mean. Every one of us has tried to build our own marriages on what we learned from watching you two. Sarah nodded. I remember asking Mother once why she worked so hard, why she took in all that sewing work when we were little. She told me about the saddle, about Father's sacrifice for her. She said she wanted to make sure he never regretted choosing her. I did not fully understand it then, but I do now. Love is not just a feeling. It is a promise you keep every day. William spoke next. When I was studying law, I read about contracts and obligations and debts. And I thought about you too. Father freed mother from a legal obligation, and she spent decades working to repay him for something he never considered a debt. That is grace. That is love beyond what any law could mandate. You gave us an example of what it means to truly put another person first. Thomas, the youngest, was last. I am about to get married, and I am terrified I will not be able to live up to the example you set, but I am going to try. I am going to try to love Anna the way you love each other, completely, selflessly, forever. Catherine was crying openly now, and Isaac's eyes were wet as well. He cleared his throat roughly. Your mother and I are just people. We made plenty of mistakes over the years, but the one thing we got right was choosing each other and then choosing each other again every day after that. If we gave you that example, if you learned from watching us, then I think we succeeded at the most important part of being parents. You succeeded at all the parts, James said firmly. You gave us everything. A home, love, security, opportunity, values, everything that matters. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Isaac and Catherine sat alone on the porch. The house was full of the people they loved most, and tomorrow everyone would start heading home back to their own lives. But tonight, they were all together. Did you ever imagine this? Catherine asked. That night in the saloon when you gambled for my contract, did you imagine it would lead to all this? Isaac thought about it. I did not think beyond trying to help you. I just knew I could not walk away. But this, all of this, he gestured to the house full of sleeping family members. This is beyond anything I could have dreamed. This is everything. Me too, Catherine said softly. I was so lost back then, so hopeless. I thought my life was over. And then you showed me it was just beginning. You gave me a future, Isaac. You gave me everything. You gave me just as much, Isaac insisted. You took a rootless cowboy and gave him a home, a family, a purpose beyond just the next job. You made me want to be better, to build something lasting. And you worked so hard all these years to honor what we started together. They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands like young sweethearts, though they had been married for over 3 decades. The night was cool and clear, stars visible in the vast Nevada sky. I kept my promise, Catherine said eventually. I promised I would spend my life making sure you never regretted trading that saddle for my freedom. Did I succeed? Do you have any regrets? Isaac turned to look at her, this woman he had loved for so long, her face lined now but still beautiful to him. Not a single one. Not one single moment of regret. Trading that saddle was the best decision I ever made. It brought me you. It brought me this life. It brought me everything that matters. How could I possibly regret that? Catherine smiled, the same smile that had captured his heart 34 years ago. Good. Then I kept my promise. You did more than that, Isaac said. You gave me a lifetime of love. You built a home and a family with me. You stood by me through good times and bad. You saved my life when I was sick. You amaze me every single day. If anyone should be asking about regrets, it is me. Do you regret the life we built together? Do you ever wish things had been different? Never, Catherine said firmly. Not once. You freed me, Isaac, not just from Dutch Morgan, but from a life of fear and hopelessness. You showed me what it means to be truly loved. You gave me our children, our grandchildren, this ranch, this life. How could I possibly regret any of it? Every choice I made, every sacrifice, every hard day was worth it because it was for you, for us, for our family. Isaac pulled her close and kissed her forehead. Then we are both blessed. We found each other against all odds, and we built something beautiful together. The most beautiful thing, Catherine agreed, a life full of love. They sat together on the porch long into the night, two people who had defied the odds and built something extraordinary from a single act of kindness and courage. The cowboy who had traded his prize saddle for a stranger's freedom. The woman who had spent a lifetime making sure he never regretted it. Their love story had become legend in Carson City and beyond, but for them, it was simply their life. Imperfect, challenging at times, but filled with a love that had only grown deeper and stronger with each passing year. The years continued their steady march forward. In 1915, Isaac and Catherine celebrated their 36th wedding anniversary. They were both in their mid-50s now, their hair fully gray, their bodies showing the wear of a lifetime of hard work. But they were still active, still engaged with their family and the ranch, still deeply in love. That year brought changes. Thomas and his wife Anna moved into the main house with their two small children to help care for Isaac and Catherine, who were both starting to slow down. Isaac's lungs had never fully recovered from the pneumonia 7 years earlier, and he tired easily. Catherine had developed arthritis in her hands, making the detailed work she had once loved painful. But they adapted, finding new ways to contribute. Isaac spent hours each day sitting with his grandchildren, telling them stories about the old days, teaching them about horses. Catherine worked on the ranch accounts when her hands allowed and spent time with her granddaughters, teaching them to sew and cook and manage a household. One day in late summer, Catherine found Isaac in the barn, running his hand over his prize saddle. The saddle was showing its age now, the leather worn smooth from decades of use, but it was still beautiful. Isaac often came out to look at it, remembering, thinking about old times. Catherine asked, coming to stand beside him. "Always," Isaac said with a smile. "This saddle has been with me for 35 years now, more than half my life. Every time I see it, I think about you, about how much you loved me to work so hard for so long to give me this." "It was nothing compared to what you gave me," Catherine said, taking his hand. "You gave me my life back. You gave me freedom and love and a family. A saddle seems like a small thing in comparison." "It is not about the saddle," Isaac said. "It never was. It is about what it represents. Your love. Your determination. Your commitment to keeping your promise. You said you would make sure I never regretted choosing you, and you spent decades proving it. Not because you had to, but because you wanted to. Because you love me as much as I love you." Catherine leaned against him, and they stood together in the quiet barn. Outside, they could hear their grandchildren playing, their laughter carrying on the summer breeze. It was a sound that never failed to make them both smile. "We had a good life," Catherine said. "The best life." "We did," Isaac agreed. "And it is not over yet. We still have time." And they did have time, precious years still ahead. They watched their grandchildren grow. They celebrated as William's career continued to flourish and he was appointed a judge. They grieved when Sarah's husband died suddenly and welcomed her home to the ranch with her children. They rejoiced when Thomas and Anna announced they were expecting another baby. In 1918, as the Great War was ending, Isaac and Catherine celebrated their 39th wedding anniversary. It was a small celebration, just family, but it was filled with love. Their children and grandchildren gathered around them, and James proposed a toast to our parents, to a love story that has inspired all of us, to two people who showed us that real love means sacrifice, commitment, and choosing each other every single day, to the cowboy who traded his prize saddle for her freedom, and to the woman who spent a lifetime making sure he never regretted it. Everyone raised their glasses, and Isaac and Catherine looked at each other across the table. 40 years since that night in the saloon. 40 years of building a life together. 40 years of love. No regrets, Catherine asked softly, just for him. Not a single one, Isaac replied. You kept your promise, my love. You made sure every day of our marriage was worth that saddle and so much more. But you need to know something. I would have traded 100 saddles for you. 1,000. Everything I owned. You were worth it all. And you gave me everything worth having, Catherine said. A life, a family, love, purpose, joy. Everything good in my life came from you choosing to help me that night, from you being the kind of man who could not walk away from someone in need. In 1920, Isaac's health began to decline more seriously. The damage to his lungs from the pneumonia years earlier was catching up with him. He could no longer do much physical work, and even walking tired him. But his mind was sharp, and he spent his days surrounded by family. Catherine rarely left his side. She read to him, talked with him, sat with him in comfortable silence. They reminisced about their life together, about the early days on the ranch, about their children growing up, about all the moments big and small that had made up their marriage. I am sorry, Isaac said one day in early autumn. I am sorry I am not the strong man I used to be. I am sorry you have to take care of me like this. Catherine looked at him with fierce love in her eyes. Do not ever apologize for that. You took care of me when I was lost and desperate. You protected me, provided for me, loved me. Now it is my turn. This is what we promised each other. For better or worse, in sickness and in health. I am honored to care for you, Isaac. Honored. Isaac reached for her hand, his grip weak but his emotion strong. I love you. I have loved you from the moment I first saw you in that saloon. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. I love you too, Catherine said through her tears. You are my heart, Isaac Ashford. You always have been. Isaac passed away peacefully in his sleep on October 15, 1920, with Catherine holding his hand. He was 62 years old. They had been married for 41 years. The funeral was held at the church in Carson City, and it seemed like half of Nevada showed up. Isaac had been loved and respected throughout the territory, known for his skill with horses, his integrity, and the legendary love story he had lived with his wife. Catherine stood at the graveside, supported by her children, and watched as they lowered her husband into the ground. She felt hollowed out, as if someone had removed something essential from her chest. Isaac had been her partner, her love, her best friend for over 4 decades. How was she supposed to go on without him? But as she stood there, she thought about everything they had built together. Their children, successful and happy. Their grandchildren, bright and full of promise. The ranch, thriving and secure. The legacy of their love living on in the family they had created. Isaac had given her a life when she had none. She had given him a love that never wavered. Together, they had built something that would outlast them both. You never regretted it, did you? She whispered to the grave. 41 years and you never regretted choosing me. I kept my promise, my love. I kept my promise. Catherine lived for another 12 years after Isaac's death. She spent those years surrounded by family, watching her grandchildren grow up and begin families of their own. She told the story of how she and Isaac met countless times, to grandchildren and great-grandchildren, making sure they understood the legacy they came from. The prize saddle hung in the barn, carefully preserved. Catherine had insisted it never be used again after Isaac died. It was a symbol of their love, she said, and should be preserved as such. Visitors to the ranch would ask to see it, and Catherine would tell them the whole story. The desperate young woman in the saloon, the cowboy who could not walk away, the trade that changed both their lives, the years she spent working to replace what he had given up. Did he ever regret it? People would ask. Not once, Catherine would say firmly. Not for one single day. He told me that many times, and I made sure he never had reason to. I worked every day of our marriage to honor what he did for me, to show him that his sacrifice was worth it, that I was worth it. Catherine passed away peacefully in her sleep on March 20th, 1932, at the age of 72. Her children found her in the morning, looking peaceful, almost smiling. They said she had finally gone to be with Isaac again. She was buried next to her husband in the cemetery in Carson City. Their matching headstones told the basic facts of their lives, but it was the story that had been passed down through generations that told the real truth. Isaac Ashford had walked into a saloon in Carson City, Nevada in 1878 and seen a woman who needed help. He had traded his prized saddle, 2 years of savings and hard work, to free her from a terrible fate. And Catherine Morgan had spent the rest of her life making sure he never regretted it. But more than that, they had loved each other with a depth and devotion that became legendary. They had built a life together, a family, a legacy that continued long after they were gone. They had shown everyone who knew them what real love looked like. Not just passion or romance, though they had both, but commitment, sacrifice, partnership, and choosing each other every single day for over 40 years. The ranch they built together remained in the family. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren continued to work the land, to raise horses, to tell the story of how it all began. The prize saddle Catherine had commissioned hung in a place of honor in the ranch house, preserved as a symbol of their love. And in Carson City, where their story had begun, people still told the tale. The cowboy who traded his prize saddle for her freedom. The woman who spent a lifetime making sure he never regretted it. It became the kind of love story that gave people hope, that reminded them that kindness and courage and love still mattered, even in the harsh world of the Old West. Isaac and Catherine's story proved that one moment of compassion could change everything, that a single act of courage could ripple forward through generations. That love, real love, was worth any sacrifice, and that the best things in life came not from what you held on to, but from what you were willing to give away for someone else. Their love had been extraordinary, but it had started with something simple. One person seeing another person in need and choosing to help. Everything else, all the years of marriage and family and joy that followed, grew from that one moment of choice. Isaac chose Catherine. Catherine chose Isaac. And every day after that, they chose each other again in the end. That was the real legacy they left behind. Not just the ranch or the successful children or the generations that followed. The real legacy was the proof that love, true love, was possible, that people could be kind and selfless. That sacrifice was worth it when given out of love, that a promise made could be a promise kept, that two people, against all odds, could build something beautiful together and leave the world better than they found it. The cowboy traded his prize saddle for her freedom. She spent a lifetime making sure he never regretted it, and neither of them ever did. Not for one single moment of the beautiful life they built together.